So I'm going to shift us now to talking a little bit about the how for each of these developmental stages. And I'm going to leave you with some checklists, because every good training needs a checklist. You're going to be like, what do I need to actually do with the before words child, emerging language, and conversational? In my previous video modules, we've talked about how do we fuel social emotional engagement in our students. And the Universal Design for Learning framework is a powerful tool. Combine that with some of the social emotional competencies that we're addressing here in SEEKS, and we're going to have ourselves a nice learning climate, one that really gets that emotional hook in our students. There are 3 domains that we're going to be talking about with each of these stages. The first of them is going to be section A. I refer to it as the fostering engagement. Are we doing that in multiple ways to get the emotional hook in classroom lessons? Some kids are going to be hooked the second they walk into your classroom because they love people and they've been addicted to people since they were in early infancy. Some children, however, are kind of on the fence. So we need to make sure that our activities also have a little bit of movement, are more hands-on. Maybe they have proximal visuals that the kids are holding, that they have a variety of different ways for children to get excited and engage. You're embedding their special interests and so forth. We also need to make sure we're providing information in multiple ways. I've just shared with you that not all children are fans of speech. That when you talk, they're kind of like not interested. So if we've just given them information verbally, we might fall short. We need to make sure that we also probably pair that with visuals, with hands-on materials, real-life materials, rehearsal, role play. And finally, we need to think about section C, which is encouraging expression. Are we giving students the opportunities to show what they know in many different ways? Some children love to talk, some children need to write, some children need to use a picture, sign language, they need to use their movement and role play to communicate. We need to give them lots of different ways to express themselves. So in any given lesson plan, we're going to be thinking, did I get the emotional hook? Did I provide information in multiple ways? And am I giving them an opportunity to communicate in many different ways? Most importantly, though, we need to know their developmental stage before anything else. So we're going to make sure that we are thinking about that stage as we design our instruction. In the Social Emotional Engagement Knowledge and Skills program, we have a quick reference tool that you'll be able to download along with this video module and the handouts that will show you what do we find as proficient for fostering engagement, presenting information in multiple ways, and fostering expression in relation to the developmental stage of the students that you're serving. So as you'll see here, the questions that we ask about fostering engagement are on the left-hand side. Presenting information in multiple ways, and on the second page of this handout you're going to see fostering expression. But then you'll see on the upper column up here, before words, emerging language, and conversational stage. Because what you're going to notice is what we would expect in your classroom environment will differ if a child is not yet talking to a child who is conversational level. We need to have a plan in place even before they set foot in our classroom as to what type of environment, lessons, activities we will have ready for them. In your handout packet, you will have developmentally sensible checklists. One for the before word stage, one for the emerging language, and one for the conversational level child. These are going to be coaching checklists so that we can either use them to self-assess how we're doing individually, or we can use them to mentor our colleagues and peers in teacher-to-teacher coaching sessions. That's how the SEEKS program is designed to operate. So if you're working with students that are before words, you're going to use the before words checklist. You're going to have some questions that you're going to be looking at as you watch a teacher in action or your own lesson in action. And then you'll be looking, what have I already put in place that's developmentally sensible, that's already working? Then you might brainstorm some next steps as a collaborative group. And when you're brainstorming those next steps, you're thinking, how do I foster more engagement? Are there more opportunities for initiation, independence, and investment? So we're going to do this by developmental stage so you have a chance to see what's on those checklists as essential instructional strategies. For those of you who are preschool educators and you're watching this, you may have a mixed group of children. You may have students that are conversational level in your classroom and a child who is before words. So we want to be thinking about, even if there's only one student in your classroom that is before words, we need to be thinking, am I prioritizing that child's spontaneous nonverbal communication? Especially in group environments where we have less one-on-one attention, this child's most important priority is to connect with people at a high rate and high frequency so that they can acquire language like their peers. So your before words checklist is something that I want you to pay attention to right now. So what we're looking at for the before words stage in terms of fostering engagement is, Are there visuals in place so that this child can predict the sequence of the activities and the steps of the activities that are very, very concrete? If they don't have language, a picture schedule is a gamble. You're going to want to have actual baskets of materials laid out in sequence. I'm going to skip ahead to another section right here. If you want to get the emotional hook in classroom lessons for a before words child, keep in mind people are probably not going to do it. So you're going to want to have movement, hands-on, art, music, cooking activities. Those are going to be the things that are going to really get the hook. You put concrete materials out in front of a child, laid out in sequence, and they've got the sensory properties they're interested in. You're going to be a lot, a lot more actively engaging for that child than if you did not have those materials present. Section B, where we present information in multiple ways, we need to really be cognizant of that for before word students. Verbal language needs to be paired with visuals, photographs, hands-on, real-life materials. And finally, allowing multiple options for action expression. Your checklist items are going to be looking at, do you have see-through containers placed in front of the child so that they can indicate their choices and communicate to you? Are you giving them opportunities for initiation, and are you responding to their subtle cues? So here are a couple of examples, and we're going to then use the checklist as we kind of conclude this section. One question that we ask ourselves if we have before words children in our classroom is, are developmentally sensible visuals accessible for getting the hook by sequencing daily activities, objects of reference, transition baskets, and photos? In this particular classroom environment, they're doing an art project where they're actually taking a pillow and they're going to stuff it with stuffing. And what she's done for each of the children is given them 3 baskets, number 1, number 2, and number 3. So children can see the materials that they need step by step. You don't have to have a lot of language to understand that flow, and this is a really great way to teach them early literacy as well, the idea of left to right kind of orientation. So having baskets laid out in sequence is a key strategy. If your student is very impulsive and likely to grab materials out of open baskets, I would recommend having a see-through container with a lid on it so that that can be laid out in sequence, and therefore you can kind of control whether they're accessing them or not. For the before words child, another question we would ask about fostering engagement in different ways is, are developmentally sensible supports embedded to stimulate interest and motivation proactively? When I'm reading them a story, I have to understand. They may not understand the words I'm using orally, nor will they understand the words on the print. But they may see the pictures here, and they may see the real-life materials in front of them. If we present information in multiple ways, they're going to develop that symbolism. This is a book called 10 on the Sled, and it was read during winter time. And she has gotten pretend snow all over with cotton, an actual sled, and all of the 10 animals are depicted with stuffed animals. And as each page is read, a child is given a turn to put one of those animals on the sled. So there's hands-on materials the children can touch and feel and explore and try to connect with that early symbolism of what's in the storybook right here. They also have something to hold for the majority of the time, so they're experiencing that engagement at a real tactile level, which is really key for helping them stay with the group. We also want to think about Section B, which is providing information in multiple ways for the before words child. This is an example of a child being asked to make a transition from outdoor play back inside the classroom. The teacher has a visual for scheduling that shows it's time for snack time. Now, this child does not speak. He doesn't use picture communication himself, so that could be it's like a foreign language. But because she's paired it with an actual object that you'll see in her left hand right here, a see-through container of this child's favorite snack items, so these little potato chips, and when he sees that, off he goes into the classroom because he understands the expectation now it's presented in such a concrete way. We call that an object of reference, and you'll see that in the checklist for a child who's before words. Finally, in terms of Section C, encouraging expression in multiple ways. If you have students who are before words, I can't emphasize enough, you're going to want to get a bunch of see-through containers with lids on them. That way, they have an array of choices presented to them. They can scan and simply touch the container that they're interested in. They may not look at you just yet because they're learning about social orientation. But if they touch it, that's your way of knowing, I know what their intention is. They would like that item in that container. If you take it and open it and hand it to them, they will learn it's really nice to have people around. People are great sources of assistance for me. That child may very well learn to start giving you containers and building on their expression. So I thought I would give us a chance to practice this with just kind of a case example. So you have the checklist hopefully downloaded in front of you so that you can see it close up. And I'm going to show you the different sections. We're going to look at what's working in this lesson already according to this checklist, and then we will brainstorm what we can do next in terms of next steps. This is how we use checklists in our coaching sessions. We use a coaching methodology that we'll be talking about in a future module called appreciative inquiry. We always appreciate what's already working in a lesson, and then we brainstorm with inquiry where there might be opportunities to increase student engagement. So it's a very positive process as we use this particular checklist. So I've used this example once prior, and you see the boy in this particular lesson is dancing his engagement levels. On some occasion, he has an emerging fleeting, where he's barely paying attention to her. He might look at her occasionally, but most of the time he's looking at the ceiling. He's sitting in proximity, so we're not completely no focus. Over here, though, you'll see as she moves around the tray a little bit, he gets a little bit more interested because she's dancing the tray, and it's more like a game of can I put the ping pong ball into the tray. So we see a little bit more emerging fleeting. At the beginning, I'm going to look at what is she doing to try to get his engagement level. She's using a very clear tray with the items that need to be moved from one basket to the next. That's going to have a clear beginning and end point. There's using concrete objects there. There's a reward out on the table here with his favorite treats like gummy bears and cookies and so forth, with a clear photograph and see-through containers. So he can see that, and he knows that there's something preferable coming in the future. So those are really nice kind of supports. She's got a close proximity to him. Those are other things that I'm considering as strengths. And here she realizes, I got to get a little bit more playful because he's not paying any attention to this tray, so I start to sing a little bit and move the tray about. And that actually gets him to respond. So movement and music were very helpful for him in that particular baseline example. So what I need to do is go back to the checklist and say, I wonder how I might be able to increase his engagement. In terms of section A, right here, which is fostering engagement in multiple ways, the teacher was already doing this. She was using visuals to laid out in sequence so the child could predict the end point of the activity and knew that he was working toward that treat that was over to her left on the table. So there were visuals to denote the sequence and steps of activities that were very concrete. Did she present information in multiple ways? She paired her instructions with movement and real-life materials. So you'll see that's something she did over here. And was she allowing for multiple options for action and expression? She had visual supports like a see-through container so he could make a choice of his favorite goldfish cracker or gummy bear. And those were things that I saw that might have been working in that initial activity. But next steps. Is there an opportunity to increase this to students' active engagement in her? Our priority is her, not the matching task. How do we get him more excited about that? He kind of liked the music. He kind of liked the movement. Where might we go next? And as you look through here, you see some of the areas that we haven't checked off. Have we truly stimulated his interest in this task? Is it hands-on enough? Is it sensory enough? How do we get him to love matching? How do we get him to get excited about that? Next steps might be, let's sing the whole time. Let's use more messy play materials with him. Let's bring some of that kind of sensory-based engagement out to see if we can get him more interested. How do we get him to express more in terms of next steps in section C? Possibly we sit face-to-face with each other so that we can get that excitement going toward the people as opposed to the things. There's different ways of using this checklist. You're going to brainstorm as a team what you feel is working, but you're going to be thinking about maybe it's an issue of fostering engagement, presenting information in multiple ways, and allowing multiple options of expression. This is a way to kind of help you brainstorm. If you're not sure what to do, you go back to your quick reference tool that we were talking about earlier. And what that results in is a shift in activity leading toward more full engagement. She's going to sing more. She's going to have more hands-on materials accessible to him when he's matching. The matching task in the end had a lot of coloring, food coloring and food dye and pouring water on his hands. That's going to get him more stimulated and more interested than just putting a ping pong ball into a basket. So we need to think about ways to kind of grab his intrinsic motivation. So that's an example of how you would apply this at the before word stage. So now I'm going to talk about what we do when we have a student in your classroom that's at the emerging language stage. Again, even if you have a range of different developmental stage in there, you're going to want to make sure that your learning climate is really developmentally sensible for a child who's just learning to use speech, pictures, sign language, and developing his or her creative language skills. highest priority is to be combining people's names, verbs, and nouns to share intentions. So we see a little bit of that in our Georgia Early Learning Standards. We see that a little bit in the Common Core and Georgia Standards and so forth. But we need to be thinking about it just from a standpoint of accessing the curriculum. This is critical. Our children need to know our teachers' names. They need to know their peers' names and the verbs, and that's going to launch them into the conversational stage. So are we modeling that, and do we have developmentally sensible supports in place to foster engagement, present information in multiple ways, and foster expression, given the fact that developmentally, in terms of their language skills, they're about 18 months to around 3.5 years of age. They may be chronologically older, and they certainly may be intellectually more able in many different aspects of their development. But when you're thinking about expressive language skills that just involve 1 or 2 words, and they're struggling along that route, you need to make sure that we have these kinds of supports in place, the instructional strategies that you see in the check boxes under the what's working of these sections here. So one question we ask ourselves around fostering engagement for the emerging language stage child is, are we providing developmentally sensible visuals? And are they accessible to hook the child by sequencing daily activities and the steps within an activities? I consider that to be an emotionally engaging hook, because if you don't know what's coming, how can you put your emotional investment into it? Children need to know, I'm going to get to glue, I'm going to get to cut, I'm going to get to give this to mom, I'm going to bring that all together. This example on the right-hand side shows what we call a help box. And this particular example shows a Mother's Day project where the children were going to make little Mother's Day flower pots for their moms to take home. It's 3 simple steps: color, dig, and plant. Done in nice, bold, written words, keeping in mind some of these children are not reading yet, so we put a graphic right next to it. But they also have the real-life materials on the table themselves, so they're certainly going to understand the predictability. I have to also point out that in that same picture, you're going to notice photographs of the children's faces, so that if a child doesn't have the materials they need, they can call out a peer's name to access the materials, which is really an important kind of instructional strategy for emerging language stage students. I don't want them to just say, I want the shovel, please. All they're learning is how to request objects. I want them to say, Sarah, pass the shovel. If we model people's names, it's going to build that creative language skills so much more, and that's really part of the school climate that we're trying to address. Over here, you're going to see a teacher orienting her class toward the daily schedule to know what the expectations are. And look at their eagerness and attention to those visuals. She's selling each step as if it's the most exciting thing they've ever done, and that's part of getting that emotional hook. So this is really a key part of the emerging language stage student. Now, in Section B, providing information in multiple ways, is information provided in multiple ways to ensure comprehension of academic and language concepts. What you're seeing here is a bright and bold example of a read aloud. They have just read a story. I think it was a Pete the Cat story about splashing in the puddles in the rain. So they've got an umbrella. They've got actual sounds of rain and a lightning storm on the smartboard right here. Then they are going to role play it with water bottles and spray on top of the umbrella. The lucky child who gets to be under the umbrella gets to hear the rain. So talk about a multi-sensory experience to let children understand what it is, what rain is, and splashing and keeping dry and wet and so forth. So really learning those particular concepts. This particular lesson also really hits the expression piece very nicely. The speech and language pathologist is under the umbrella, and she has a visual support in front of her that's going to allow the students to say, David, hold the umbrella, or Miss Shannon, spray the water. So they're going to have to build sentences about what they're going to be enacting and role-playing about the story. So you'll see that on your checklist under Section E, the importance of pairing verbal information with visuals, role-play, real-life materials, and so forth. This is another example of providing information in multiple ways to ensure comprehension of these concepts. They're reading Eric Carle's story, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, I believe. And as they read each of the pages, you'll see that they're feeding the actual animal right there. So they're acting out and role-playing the story as they read it. A very powerful tool for literacy comprehension. You'll also see what is referred to as the core vocabulary boards from the LAMP program, the Language and Motor Planning program that is available out there. This particular type of visual support can be very helpful for reinforcing language concepts like in and out and on, to also be able to understand language as teachers talk. They can point to the visuals as well, so they have multiple means of understanding what they have just been communicated. And then in terms of section C, which is about encouraging expression in multiple ways, if we have emerging language stage students in our classroom, we're going to want to look at that checklist and we're going to see, are developmentally sensible visuals in place to help remind students of key language targets? Am I remembering to do that to help children learn how to ask for my name, Emily, open the yogurt? Such an important key language target. It's also a visual reminder to us as teachers and paraeducators in the classroom that we actually are modeling our names a lot. I often gauge that, but when I watch videos of classrooms, if I don't learn your name in like 15 minutes, it's quite likely none of the students are using your name either. So we need to be modeling people and verbs all day long. Such a key target there. The other part of encouraging student expression is the idea of giving many visuals for children to stay active participants. I'm a huge fan during rug time activities or circle time activities for children to have what we call proximal visuals. As you can see in this particular classroom, they're simply doing the days of the week, the months of the year, different things that you do like the weather at circle time, and we have little packets of materials that each of the kids will pull out, and they'll follow along with the days of the week songs and the month of the year. By giving them that other means of expressing, so it's not just verbal or maybe through hand movements, this child will have an opportunity to stay actively engaged simply by pointing to words in front of them and really connecting them to the language. Very powerful tool. So I wanted to just take a quicker look at that checklist here. So as you're looking at this particular form, when you're looking at the checklist, you're going to want to be looking at each of those sections, fostering engagement, presenting information in multiple ways, and so forth, and be looking over on the right-hand side where it says what's working. And you'll have some really concrete ideas as to what might be effective to foster engagement in the emerging language stage child, such as visuals for sequencing daily activities, photos, pictures, objects, visuals for the steps within a task, reminders of language to request coping strategies, such as requesting break or help, things to hold. Lesson includes a hook related to students' interest or preferred hands-on materials. It's linked to real-life application, and that you're adjusting demands as needed to sustain engagement. So you can see how critical those items are for the emerging language stage student, and you might check off what you already have in place or what you're seeing in that lesson, but then be able to brainstorm. I wonder if we can provide a little bit more of that particular element to see if we can foster student engagement. You're going to see similar things at the presenting information in multiple ways as well.